Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Dan Kokotov. Dan is the VP of Engineering at Rev.com. Dan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, JP. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We're delighted to have you. So, Dan, let's start with yourself. Can you give us a brief background of your journey in tech, from where you got started, some of the roles you've held along the way, taking us up to where you are today as the VP of Engineering for Rev?
Sure. Maybe we can start pretty early on. I grew up in Russia. Actually, I grew up in Moscow. And at the time, like in Russia, not many people had personal computers. This was like in the 1980s. But I was one of the few, I guess, to have access to some computers because my mom specifically worked as a computer programmer. So I like fairly vividly remember visiting her at her office. Mostly was to play video games, of course, but that kind of gave me my first taste in computers, and I was like fairly hooked. When we came to the US, I was 13. A computer was one of the first things like I asked my parents to buy once we had some money. And so they got me, I think it was like a Wayne Computers PC. It's like early 90s. And so I started learning programming languages on my own, from BASIC to Pascal to C, and just started writing a lot of little programs. And to me, it was like magic. You could write this code and hit run, and it would do something. The barrier to entry was extremely low, which is like unlike most other engineering disciplines, where there's quite a long ways before you can get some results. So that kind of confirmed to me that this is what I wanted to do. And so when I went to college, I studied computer science, bachelor's and master's. And then when I actually started working, I worked for two companies, one called Vector Technologies and one called 5M Solutions. And they were both in life sciences and healthcare software. So we were building software for National Cancer Institute, National Institute of Health, Veterans Administration, helping them solve various problems in healthcare and life sciences. And it was pretty fun stuff, but this was consulting, effectively. We had clients, they kind of told us what to do. We would implement it. So it was varied work, but I started wanting to shift more towards product development. And so in late 2010, early 2011, we started Rev with a few of my friends from college, and that's where I've been ever since. And I've worn a variety of hats there, which I can happy to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for the background, and unsurprisingly, like many of our guests, the interest in technology started as a kid and flourished into a passion and a career. But you mentioned there, you talked about your journey to Rev. So before we go any further on your role and the various hats, tell us all about Rev, who you are as a business, what you do, the mission of the organization, the origins behind it, and then we can go into your various roles.
Yeah, definitely. So we founded Rev with a mission of creating great work from home jobs. And where we came up with that mission is our CEO, Jason, prior to Rev, he worked at a company called Odesk. Now it's called Upwork. And at Odesk, he got familiar with the freelancer model. Started as connecting companies with programmers. These programmers were typically in Eastern Europe or other countries, and enabled people in those countries to have access to more interesting, high-paying work, and enabled companies to hire higher quality programmers than maybe they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So kind of Jason saw like the promise of this held, bringing more opportunity to people and enabling them to work where maybe, as I mentioned, either they didn't have access to those jobs or their schedules wouldn't allow them to do it, and so on and so forth. He started Rev. He wanted to improve on that model. And there are two main ways that Rev improves on it. One, for the freelancers, with a model like Odesk, companies would actually browse profiles of freelancers and they would pick the ones that they were interested in. As a freelancer, you had to spend a lot of your time burnishing your profile, hunting for reviews, asking your previous companies that you worked with to give you good reviews. So there's a lot of extraneous activities unrelated to actually doing the work, and activities that these freelancers were not necessarily that good at. On the flip side, the companies also had to figure out which freelancers are good purely by looking at their profiles. That's something they were not necessarily qualified to do either. So we wanted to hide the complexity from both the freelancers and the companies. So as a customer, you would just come to the Rev website, you would, let's say, have some need for a transcription or translation, you would upload your files, the pricing would be simple and clear, and then you would get the results in a day or two or less. And you didn't have to worry about how it was done or by whom. On the flip side, as a freelancer or as a Rever, as we call them, you could just, once you're admitted to the platform, you would log in, you would see what content there is to work on that day. Maybe you like doing interviews, or maybe you like doing lectures. You'd be able to have some filters that let you pick the kind of work you wanted to do. And you would just see a list of audios that you needed to transcribe, and you would start doing it. So you didn't have to interact with customers much, didn't have to worry about all that kind of stuff. So that was one of the big changes we made to the freelancer model, and it worked really well. And the second change was we saw that too often in this kind of freelancer labor marketplace business, freelancers were treated very interchangeably. And the kind of game was to optimize things and not to worry too much about the people themselves. And we saw an opportunity to make freelance work rewarding and meaningful, and something that you could treat like more of a career. So we tried to give the freelancers much more sense of a community, tools to help them improve their skills, and so on. And again, the kind of results speak for themselves. We pretty quickly grew over the first few years of Rev's existence to be the largest provider of transcription, captioning, subtitles. So that's the origin story.
Yeah, great story. The fact that you guys have been able to become the biggest known dominating brand in this space. So you touched on you've worn many hats at your time at Rev. Can you give us some insight into your current role and how AI and data science and machine learning plays a pivotal role in what your team does?
Absolutely. And this kind of also touches on a pivotal moment in Rev's history. So I gave you the first few years, let's say. And for those few years, we were mostly only about work done by humans. Yeah, transcription, translation, captioning, these were all done by our Revers. And about 5 years ago, we kind of started to see a revolution in AI with the advent of deep learning. And this was transforming many fields of AI, including speech recognition. When we first started the company, speech recognition was pretty nascent. You might have drag and dictate on your computer, and maybe if you spoke very clearly and you had a nice microphone and no accent, it would work out pretty well. But for the kind of audience that our customers had, it wasn't good enough. But like I said, about 5 years ago, this started to change, and more audio now could be transcribed pretty successfully by automated speech recognition. So we didn't want this to disrupt our main business. We wanted to learn more about it and see if we can contribute as well. So we talked to a lot of smart people. What we discovered is the most important thing to having a good speech recognition engine is having great data, great labeled data. And this is something we had more than any other company in the world, because we've been doing human transcription for several years at that point and had accumulated a large store of 99% accurate transcripts. So we decided to see if we could build a speech recognition engine that would be better than what's out there. We started a small team, hired some very smart people, and pretty much gave them a big goal, a wildly ambitious goal in retrospect, because this is an area where you have Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple all putting many smart people against this problem. But it turned out we were very successful. And a couple of years later, we had our own speech rec engine that for this kind of content, long form conversations or lectures, interviews, etc., was better than anything we could see out there. And so we started using this first to give our Revers a better starting point. Instead of having to start transcriptions from scratch, we then gave it to end users. So we added a service to our website where you could ask for just an automated speech recognition transcript instead of a human transcript. And then finally, most recently, we started Rev AI, which is our developer platform, where if you want to build an innovative new product and that product requires speech, that you would use Rev AI. So kind of like a long way of introducing my current role, which is VP Engineering for Rev AI.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
Tell us all about Rev AI, the idea behind that, and give us maybe some examples of the impact that it's having for your customers.
Yeah. As I said, we basically We have a research team that works on training new models and adding new capabilities. We have an engineering team that is responsible for putting those things into production, making them scalable, capable of running millions of transcription jobs. And we've gotten some great customers. One great use case is a company called Axon. They're the largest maker of body cams that are worn by police. If you follow the news recently, you've probably seen if there's a news story about interaction between police and citizens, usually there will be a video from the police body cam. And a natural use case is to want to have a transcript of that as soon as possible. And you can analyze it in various ways, included in stories and so on. So we are working with Axon very closely to be their provider of speech to text for these transcripts. I'm personally excited about it because this is a case where we can really help society. We all want to know the truth of these interactions, and our technology can help the public learn that truth and understand these incidents.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any type of innovation, given more clarity around what's happening in that field, is obviously a great thing. So focusing now on the technology and the team that you've built, can you give us some insight into the evolution of Rev and where you're at currently and how modern AI machine learning plays a role in helping you work on Rev AI?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we started small. When we first launched the team, it was really a couple of people on the speech side and a couple of engineers. And it was like a really fun time. It was almost a repeat of when we first started Rev, and we were really small. And we were this David fighting a Goliath, even more so in this case, because as I mentioned earlier, we had these Goliaths in the form of Google and Amazon and some of these other established players. And we made progress very quickly. And then we started growing the team and really adding more specialist roles to be able to take advantage of the latest in the industry. More expertise in MLOps so that our training pipeline can be more state-of-the-art, more people who understand end-to-end architectures and the latest neural network architectures, people with NLP experience, and so on. So pretty much we've been growing the team, adding smart people, adding smart engineers, and expanding the scope of our offering. At the beginning, we were pretty much offering only async speech to text. So that means if you already have the audio, you want to get a transcript. Now we have real time. We're starting to offer multiple languages, and we're expanding from there. I think the next great frontier that we hope to tackle in the next couple of years is to go beyond speech to text and what we like to call speech to insights, because the transcript is just the starting point. Ultimately, you might want to know what topics were discussed in this transcript. Maybe get a summary so you can understand it without having to read every single word. Get a sense of what are the key subjects that were raised by the transcript. So this is like going to be a big part of our focus over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and obviously with the advancement in technology, it allows for all these new use cases and creates interesting projects for you and your team to work on. You and I were speaking before the interview about the impact of the pandemic and the changing workforce and how technology is going to have to evolve with that. And you had some really interesting points. So I definitely want to get your take on that and what you've personally seen with the change pre and post COVID.
Yeah, exactly. We've I guess all gotten used to doing a lot of Zoom meetings over this last year and a half. And it's honestly nice to see that like some of the Zoom meetings are being replaced by in person. But everything being captured on Zoom has its advantages, right? Now it's like creating a record. I think we've always thought is there's a ton of information that's locked in these meeting recordings that companies are not able to take advantage of today. If you have a bunch of chats on Slack, you can go back and search them and find key things that are said. But the same thing has generally not been true of. And I think with the advent of speech to text, we can revolutionize that. So imagine if when you're trying to remember what was said about some topic, you would be searching not just your Slack chats, but also all your meetings. And it could be matching on, as I mentioned before, topics or matching against the summary. And then you get a list of all the search results and can quickly go to the right place and recall it. During such and such meeting, Dan and GP were talking about what it would mean for the future work that now we have all these transcripts. So I think that's pretty powerful. To me, it's like when the mobile phone was first invented. Like at first, we were just kind of, okay, it's another way to talk on the phone. But then people started discovering ways that people could work more efficiently because they had this phone with them. That could use at any time. So something like Uber was only possible with a mobile phone. Most of the time people can, you're on the street and you request an Uber now, it's there right away. So I think the same thing with the advent of all these meetings being recorded and easily transcribed. Now suddenly you could work more efficiently because maybe you don't need to attend as many meetings. Maybe you can use speech to text plus summarization and insights to stay on top of a lot more stuff that you couldn't personally attend. Now you suddenly more, I think we're very early in figuring out how these tools can be leveraged to be more efficient at work.
Absolutely. Well, you're certainly working in an exciting field that has a huge potential for continuous innovation, and the use of AI, machine learning, is only going to grow over time. And Rev sounds like a fascinating place to work. You've obviously built a great team and been able to scale while maintaining your lead position. So I appreciate you coming on today, Dan, and talking to us about everything that's going on at Rev. And we wish you and the team all the best in the future.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's an exciting time. I feel like we're, as I mentioned, just in the second or third inning of this revolution. And I can't wait to see what the later innings will bring.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.